The Spotlight brought to you by Beacon Plumbing.
People have been rallying, hoping to put a stop to sex offender transfers off McNeil Island. It's a story we've been tracking for weeks after the Department of Health and Human Services said 5 of these worst of the worst predators would be moving to Tenino. Well, good evening and welcome to the Spotlight. I'm David Rose. That controversial, less restrictive alternative housing plan, or LRA, has been canceled, shuttered before it could even open its doors. The nondescript home on several acres has been a flashpoint for fear and anger in the town for weeks, after residents learned that the owner, Supreme Living LLC, was looking to house 5 level 3 sex offenders there. There were accusations the company had kept their plans quiet until the last minute, and the Thurston County Sheriff also pointed out several security flaws. We have in-depth coverage, beginning with the Spotlight's Nia Wong, who reports residents were almost as shocked by the announcement that Supreme Living was pulling out as when they heard they were moving in.
Supreme Living cited resources and costs as the reasons why they're not moving forward with this home. Meanwhile, families living nearby tell me they are breathing easier tonight, knowing sexually violent predators won't be moving in next door. All the rallies, petitions, and the power of community have made this past year worth it for Tenino mother Sarah Fox.
On the verge of tears. It's a huge sense of relief that I don't have 6 sexually violent predators in my backyard.
1 month ago, level 3 sex offenders from McNeil Island were supposed to move into this facility, but that's no longer the case. Supreme Living LLC, in charge of the project, no longer plans to use this home. Fox considers this outcome a victory.
It is all about community and it's all about follow through.
While Supreme Living LLC announced in a statement it wouldn't provide supportive housing services at its Tenino property, it didn't mention its next steps. Under the state share law, a less restrictive housing alternative will have to go somewhere in Thurston County.
The fight's just begun.
Fox's neighbor, Carrie Jeter, started the original petition to local representatives.
We had a benefit concert. We did a town hall and just asked for donations to hire an attorney. And so, yeah, we just really had a supportive community behind us.
They believe they can recreate their success on the state level.
And now we started a second petition to Governor Inslee specifically.
As of Tuesday night, their newest petition has more than 2,100 signatures.
And we're going to make this right, and we're going to keep pushing this to the legislatures. We're going to educate people, and we're going to get everybody on board to keep Washington safe.
We reached out to Supreme Living. Right now, it's unclear if they or state officials will seek another location in Tenino or in other parts of the state.
The big concern now for people in Tenino is that more level 3 sex offenders will be housed in Thurston County, but no one knows where that will be. And those offenders are coming eventually. State law leaves no doubt about that. Back in 2021, Senate Bill 5163 created the fair share principle. The goal? Make sure that one county does not have to house a disproportionate amount of residents leaving McNeil Island.
Such as Pierce County. The reason why you have more people coming out on LRAs is because you have done a good job in putting together the infrastructure. Other counties need to do a similar good job and take responsibility for the people who, for the fact that they have used this statute and need to provide housing for people who come out.
But not only do residents living near an LRA have to deal with a new sense of insecurity, nearby homeowners are telling us that their property values are dipping as a result. So where else are these programs found? In almost every county around Puget Sound. There were 12 LRAs in Pierce County, 7 in King County. Snohomish and Spokane each have 3. Thurston and Kitsap have 2 each, and there's 1 in Walla Walla. Representative Dan Griffey, a Republican representing the 35th District, helped sponsor House Bills 1813 and 1734, which would put a moratorium on releases from McNeil Island while legislators looked at where LRAs are allowed to open. Those bills did not make it out of committee this session, but the public's concern is not going away anytime soon.
This is an issue that's going to affect a lot of people in Washington state. It's not a rural versus urban issue. It's not a them versus us issue. This is an issue for everyone. It can happen in your neighborhood.
Indeed, placing sexually violent predators is a bipartisan problem. Who sets the rules for LRAs and for moving residents into the community in the first place? The 13-member Washington Sex Offender Policy Board. They are law enforcers, defense attorneys, victim advocates, and treatment specialists, including psychologist Michael O'Connell, who understands why people are suspicious of the whole process.
I think people thinking that people who are adjudged sexually violent predators are higher risk, that's a perfectly reasonable place to start. Nothing about that is irrational. But then you got to dig deeper and say, and then what? And has that changed since they were civilly committed? And presumably, a judge has found that something has changed.
Can a sexually violent predator be rehabilitated?
And I have some experience with people who have awful histories, repeat offenses, caused a good deal of harm, did a lot of prison time and treatment time and institutional time, and slowly, gradually worked their way back into the community. It isn't always a straight line, but if there's a big enough reason to change, and life circumstances, nudge you in the direction or thrust you in the direction of needing to do that, people can change. It does take motivation. It does take a willingness to consider being a different person than you've always seen yourself as being. All things being equal, it's simpler never to have any sex offenders anywhere in the world, certainly anywhere in your town. And it is asking a lot for people to educate themselves, inform themselves, learn what they need to do. And I mean, they may still end up thinking this person is too dangerous. I think people's fears and feelings are understandable, and that's an inevitable place to start. Don't stop there.
One complaint heard time and time again was residents feeling like they'd been blindsided by the announcement that an LRA was opening in their town. That, at least, is something that can be changed. Two lawmakers have been among those leading the charge to establish a longer lead time for local residents and law enforcement to prepare when one of these LRAs sets up in their backyard. They each spoke with the Spotlight about their goals for future legislation.
After the Supreme Court ruled that people had civil liberties and a constitutional right to petition the court to get off of McNeil Island, my community was one of the first to have housing placed there. The small town of Poulsbo, the folks in Poulsbo were as unhappy as anybody is today in other communities when the home just appeared. There was no notice. It was, I think, the third or fourth placement when the community found out what was going on in their neighborhood.
We've introduced legislation that would require that when these less restrictive housing units are going to be placed somewhere, that there has to be notice given to the community, to law enforcement, to public officials, and that has to be advertised in your normal media outlets in that community so that folks have an opportunity to learn more about it and what the situation is, to be able to ask questions and challenge the situation perhaps. And it's got to be at least 14 days, not the day before something's going to be going forward. So this bill is just really to provide more transparency. In today's age, we hear that all the time, government needs to be more transparent. Well, that goes for our contractors too that we use at the state level. We contract this out to a for-profit business, but that should not absolve them from being transparent about what they're doing. And what happened in Tenino, they were not transparent at all.
Any effort we can make, any advance we can make in the system that we set up a couple of years ago, I'm happy to be a part of. Making sure that if there is a loophole, we close it. If there's weaknesses, we fix them.
We've heard residents' concerns, and we've also talked to legislators and policymakers. But when it comes to treating offenders on McNeil Island, how does that process work? And who sets the rules and the goals? The Spotlight's Alejandro Guzman traveled to McNeil Island and sat down with the Chief of Forensic Services at the Special Commitment Center to get some answers.
We thought we were the guinea pigs.
Their voices echoing what they feared was a public safety concern.
We love our kids.
It's kids. It's our whole families.
A sigh of relief now that the less restrictive alternative, LRA community housing provider Supreme Living, has decided to drop its contract with the Department of Social and Health Services. DSHS telling Fox 13 there is a process a provider needs to go through to terminate a contract, saying in part, quote, Supreme Living has indicated it plans to follow that process. We anticipate a request to terminate the contract, but we have yet to receive one in writing at this time.
It's just been really alarming. So the fact that they're not here is a win, but does that mean that the risk is gone completely? I don't know.
We've heard from residents, so we decided to take a little trip We went to McNeil Island to ask those in charge the questions that are on everyone's mind.
I recognize the difficulty of the awareness of people moving into their communities.
McNeil Island's Chief of Forensic Services, Dr. Holly Coriel, has been working with sex offenders since 2001. She says over the years, sex offense incidents have been and continue to decline.
Why is it so important to have a program and an institution like McNeil Island? What would the outcomes be if this process, if this program weren't to be established?
What we would have seen is, I think we've over the years maybe processed upwards of 500 individuals. Those individuals, if they were not detained and civilly committed, would have been released back to the communities, most probably with some level of DOC supervision for a period of time, but not consistently across the board with any requirements for treatment.
An example of this, Earl Kenneth Schreiner, who was convicted of murdering and mutilating 7-year-old Ryan Hade in 1989. He was out in the community without supervision after his sentence expired and a judge ruled he did not meet the criteria necessary to be considered an imminent danger to be committed under the state's mental health laws. His offense paved the way for what is now known as the Community Protection Act of 1990, giving Washington the power to civilly commit sex offenders for ongoing treatment until a court determines they are ready to rejoin society.
It speaks a lot to the quality of our criminal justice interventions and the focus on rehabilitation and shifting the parameter from punishment, containment to safety precautions balanced with rehabilitation. We're all working together for the betterment of the residents' treatment while keeping people safe.
Thank you, Alejandra. Up next in this episode, we'll take you to Olympia to get an update on one of the most contentious issues this legislative session, changing the rules for police pursuits. Welcome back. Washington lawmakers have taken another step towards giving police officers more freedom to chase suspects. While House Bill 1363 still won't allow officers to pursue car thieves, it does broaden the rules for other crimes and give them fewer restrictions while doing so. The Spotlight's A.J. Janabel was in Olympia for this must-pass vote that kept the legislation alive.
Wednesday, 7 in the morning, Covington. A thief in a stolen Kia uses the car as a battering ram to smash through a new business owner's front window. Inside, video captures the crook tossing carton after carton of cigarettes into the vehicle. But then, a glimmer of hope for the business owner, already facing thousands in losses from the theft and damages. But the thief just drives around the deputies, escaping on Highway 18. 2 years ago, officers could have pursued in this case. But current Washington state law prevents that kind of action. House Bill 1363 looks to walk back some of the restrictions for when officers can chase. Officers still would not be able to chase in burglaries like this one, but they would have more freedom and flexibility of when they could go after alleged bad guys.
We've learned some things since the bill originally passed, so I'm open to those ideas. But obviously I can't sign a bill that doesn't get to my desk. So I hope legislators will continue to discuss that. I hope some bill can get to my desk.
Last week, the bill passed a subcommittee in an 8-1 vote. Lawmakers, as well as city leaders and law enforcement, voicing their hope this bill will go through, but there's still a long way to go. And some, like former Seattle City Council member and current legislative director for the ACLU of Washington, Lorena Gonzalez, want to put the brakes on the pursuit bill.
Vehicle pursuits are adrenaline-charged, dangerous tactics that oftentimes result in the death of not only those being pursued, but even officers who are in pursuit. If more time is needed to collect more data, then certainly that would lead us to support a bill that is designed to study this before policies are enacted.
That opposition is led by State Senator Sen Dingra, the chair of the Law and Justice Committee, who has refused to let a companion version of this bill come up for a hearing. As we reported right here on the Spotlight, she's used some questionable data to support her position that the current policy is saving lives. Instead, she's offered a new bill calling for more study of police pursuits that would create a model policy statewide during the next session. Turning now to police stops. A bill drastically reducing the reasons an officer can pull you over was also passed by the Transportation Committee to the full House for a vote. House Bill 1513 would prevent police from stopping you for most kinds of non-moving violations like expired tabs, a cracked windshield, or a broken taillight, unless it presents an immediate safety hazard. Bill supporters say the legislation would refocus police on major safety threats like DUIs and road rage incidents, while minimizing unnecessary escalations of force.
This bill does not decriminalize any act. The acts would still be crimes. What we hope to do with this bill is to have fewer interactions so that law enforcement can get home safely to their family and so that those on the road also have that opportunity. Please vote yes.
Motorists would still be ticketed for these offenses so long as they get pulled over for another reason like speeding. But the Washington State Patrol says those low-level stops continue to serve an important purpose. Their records show 8% of DUIs between 2018 and 2022. More than 5,000 arrests originated from nonviolent violations. When we return, we're taking you back under the Ship Canal Bridge for a major change in the official approach to removing homeless camps on WashDOT's right-of-ways. Last time on the Spotlight, we focused on the frustration surrounding the spread of homeless camps on state land. In particular, the hundreds of tent towns that have sprung up on WashDOT highway right-of-ways. The Ship Canal Bridge camp had gotten so big and so dangerous that the governor stepped in. But even with Inslee's backing, neighbors were told that under the state funding contract for sweeps on WashDOT property, the campers had to be moved to permanent housing, and that could take months. So could that really be true, especially since dozens of temporary shelter beds have been sitting empty all around Seattle? To figure it out, we tracked down the lawmaker who helped write the contract, and he told us those housing officials got it all wrong.
The problem is that even though we've provided the resources, the amount of camps that are actually being physically cleaned up is not happening. And I don't believe it's happening at the level that the people of the state of Washington want or are demanding as these things explode. The most telling statistic is that they've cleaned up maybe 11 or 12 camps, but in that same time frame, over 200, 250 more have shown up. So we're going backwards in this, not forward. As I wrote that original proviso, what it specifically says is that they have to be given alternative forms of housing that are not in the right-of-way, which kind of is silly, but it makes sense, right? And that is shelter, that's congregate shelter, that could be permanent housing, that could be treatment, that could be all sorts of different things that they could use in order to do that. But I think the bottom line is we want to encourage the people to be moved out of these incredibly bad situations into shelter. And from there, if they move to permanent supportive housing or treatment or other pathways to getting them onto the road to recovery or whatever it is, that is the methodology that was always the intent behind this program. And what I'm seeing from what is now happening from the governor's office and others is reactionary. It has to get so bad, right? It has to get so bad where people are getting murdered, where you have the drugs, where you have it affecting communities and schools and everything else, that finally people will rise up and say enough is enough. But we shouldn't be in a reactionary mode when everything was designed to be proactive to get these things taken care of.
Next up, a Good Samaritan who wasn't good at all. This crook victimized an elderly lady in distress, but you can help catch him. Tonight, we're putting the spotlight on a despicable crime. An 85-year-old woman gets her car stuck in the heavy snow and ice we had back in December. She was so grateful when a man came along and then offered to help her move her car out of her driveway. There's one problem. He was no Good Samaritan at all. And now Mountain Lake Terrace police are asking for your help to identify him. Take a look at this video. Detectives say that man with the peroxide blonde hair checking out at Bartell's is using the elderly woman's credit card. She realized after she got her car stuck that her card was missing. Police say the suspect stole it from inside her vehicle while he was moving her car out of the roadway. The store surveillance video is from right before Christmas, December 23rd, and he went on quite the shopping spree. She had numerous charges for more than $1,400, and more than half of that was just spent at Bartell's. You can see his cart is loaded up. If you recognize him, if you know his name, Crime Stoppers will pay you a cash reward of up to $1,000. Text the information anonymously through the P3 Tips app on your cell phone. People ask me all the time for advice on when they can use deadly force to defend themselves, though they usually just put it more simply and ask, when can I legally shoot someone? Well, the answer is that you can use deadly force if you reasonably believe that you or someone else is in danger of being killed or seriously injured. A perfect case example happened recently in Sammamish when 4 masked men broke into a home in the middle of the night and started shooting. The homeowner's son shot back when they kicked in his bedroom door, hitting one of the suspects several times in the back. Unfortunately, he was also shot 5 times and is still recovering. Meanwhile, neighbors say they're worried, and many have cameras set up.
It's scary to hear that somebody has to defend their family with a gun, and people can just break the door and, barge in.
Investigators say the named suspect, Ricky Haynes, was dropped off at the hospital 20 minutes after the shooting. He had several gunshot wounds to his back, claiming he'd been shot in his sleep. The 3 other intruders are still on the run. If you have any information, contact the King County Sheriff's Office. And now an update on a fugitive with $1 million warrant that we featured right here on the Spotlight last time. Gary Moyer had numerous felony warrants in Kitsap County for his arrest for burglary and for trying to steal an ATM using a stolen truck. Detectives say putting him in the spotlight drove Moyer out of state, but he quickly discovered there was nowhere left to hide. Gig Harbor Police worked with Oregon State Police and the Eugene Police SWAT team to arrest him on Wednesday. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. If you have a tip or an idea for our next episode, leave it on the Spotlight page at fox13seattle.com. You can also call our Spotlight tip line. The number is on your screen, 206-674-1765. Until next time, be smart and stay safe.